Today is Yud Be'elul Hatashin Samech Tes, and we are learning Kaf Samech Tes. I read it backwards. Kaf Samech Tes. Page.
So we saw the difference between the Shabbos or the Histaushel derech Elul and the Shabbos Yesh Me'ayin. And we saw that in Ile it has a kiruv ha'erech el Elul. Elul in the inif and the Yesh Me'ayin it's a richuch ha'erech legamrei ve'ein ha'reich mamish, till the union of Hafochim, as we saw, and that comes about through the Gila of a Ha'ora de Ha'ora, which is what we call a Ha'ora Nivdelas. But the union from Ha'ora is a feel from the Moya, from the Etzem. There's the Ha'ora Achmis that we saw when it get to Ilva Olu, and then in that Gufa there occurs the Tzimtzum Arishan and other Ha'oras from Madrega la Madrega ad Malchus Ta'atzilas. And then it becomes a Ha'ora Mamish Nivdeles Alidei Malchus Ta'atzilas, as we'll see in a minute. And after all those Tzimtzumim, V'hestadium, V'helomas V'hestadium, then there's Nimshach, the Oya, which is Mislabish in the Nivra. And even though it may be Musag and Murgash, particularly by the Malachim at the Elam Salyanim, oh, that's only a soger. And our Gosha, which tried to them Madrega in Biyah, over to the actual Hisabes, how they actually come into being from the Atzma Samahaver, then the Betachlis Arichut, and Ein Lahem called a soger Bezer Cloud. As well known that it's brought down in many places. And consider that in the Etzem Inyan of Yesh Me'ayin, it's not Shayach HaSoger B'Klau. Any Inyanim which are Nimshach from the Atzmos B'derech Brio, Aboire El Hanivro, in the living of Yesh Me'ayin, they can't be masik the Etzem Inyan of Yesh Me'ayin. The Etzem Mahus HaInyan is Mudal Lahem Mehem Lagamre. And I feel in the Elam Salyanim, what they have a Hasoga, in the Etzem Ishavas, how it is Yesh Mi'ayin, or at the Betachlis Arichuf Ein Lem Hasoga V'zeh Klau. And then we saw with that, all that together, we can understand how the Hishavas Yesh Mi'ayin is not puyer any shinoi in the Atzmos, his Porah. And we saw that because it's A'inif and Ha'ora de Ha'ora, and in that Gufa, a Ha'ora Nivdelas Mimeno She'ein L'zeh Kol Erech, Elo of Cloud, therefore, Atu Acheloi Nivro Elam, Atu Misha Nivro Elam, all absolutely Bishover, because the Oilam and the whole Hisabas, all the Oilam is Alyenim, and Tatonim, they're not poil any Shinoi Cloud in Atzmusi Yisparah. That's better where we were holding, and then we went on to say that from that we come to the view of what we said originally, that the Mahava, particularly the Mahus of the Mahava, the one who brings about everything, the Haino Atzmusai, then he's Betachlis HaRichuk, in other words, that he's Mudal Betachlis Mehem. And what is Nimsha to them is only Ha'ora de Ha'ora Bilvad. V'kamoishe Motzinu b'Malachim, and like we found in the angels, Gamli Achashin is Havu, even after they've already been created, what the Gemara brings in Samech Tes Sanhedrin, it's written there that Keshahoishit HaKadosh Baruch Hu Etzpoi HaKitano Beineim Sorfon, that the Eibishter stretched out with a small finger amongst the Malachim, and he burnt them up. In other words, that they lost their whole Metzias. They were Nisaf, meaning that they went back to be a state of Ayin. So we see that the Gemara brings that when I get to a certain Indian that Kavi Yochel Davis was makpid on the Malachim, because Shehoya Aleim, so he said, V'yodua the Etzboi Haktano hi b'chinas Malchus. It's well known, it's put in different places in Siddur, that the Eibishter's small finger is Kaviochel, the Inyan of Malchus. We'll soon maybe deal with that in a second. Ukeshahoya aleim gilui mipchinas Malchus, yoisa mechoik akatzuv nishbatl. When there was a gilui into the Malachim or upon them, more from Malchusi is Borach, more than the budget, as you might call it, the choik hakotzuv, more than the actual law of what has been budgeted for their chayes, what has been set aside especially to be nimshach to them as their chayes. And it was nimshach a little bit more than that, as it were, carefully allotted amount of chayes to the malachim. They immediately lot the whole Matthias. How much more so, if that happened after they were all the Matthias, then Mikol Shechein Bichdei Shiyeh Yisavas Mati Usam, in order it should be the very Yisavas of their Matthias, then how much more so that they couldn't be Nimshach any more than the Chok HaKotzuv Lehem. If it was Nimshach, anything beyond the exact allotted amount Kavioch of Chayes to those Malachim, then Alachas Kamen V'Kamen, that they would be Batel Melchatchila, they wouldn't even come into being. So we need to understand what is that Kal V'Chayma. Why do we say that B'derech Kal V'Chayma or Kol Shkein? What are we to say that just like the Eibusha was mamshik to them a certain amount more than the Chok HaKotzuv, they became bottled. Similarly, had that been Betchilas Hisavusim, that they wouldn't have come about Melchatchila. Was it the Indian at the Kol Shkein B'Torah? And particularly, what's the Indian of Malchus being described as its boy Haktano. We see that if we look at the Adam, it's brought down in a pasuk. There's a pasuk in Tilim, I think it is. Ki ere shomelcha maaseh etzboisecha. I will look or I observe your heavens, that they are the works of your fingers. Kaviochel. They state a pasuk when I get to the Eibishter. That Yidden or David HaMelech praises the Eibishter away from Kozeh. So it's brought down, why would the heavens be called Maaseh Etzboisecha, the works of your fingers? So Chassidus teaches us that the Indian, the Chayes, for example, how it is by a mensch, the Chayes also undergoes different levels of what's called interdivision or spreading out into different details from how it is in the Moyach, and then how it goes down into the Leiv in the Midas, and then goes into Machshava and Tadiva, and eventually into Maisa. That in each level it becomes more interdivided into all sorts of specific differing levels. That's what's called these chalkes. And therefore when it's in the Moyach, it's like one united entity in one closed concept. Nefilo Anakuda, the Indian from Chochmah is Anakuda. Then it goes into Bina, it splits into more detail. And it goes into the Midas, the Indian of the Goshen, the Regish, but that divides it into all sorts of emotional reactions. And then when it goes into Machshava, Diva, and Maisa, it becomes a myriad of different types of delicate interreaction. So that's compared to the idea of the hands. And we see that the hands, they take all the chlorastic, emotional, other arousals, both b'derech hamoyach and b'derech emotion, and all those inyanim that have been in the mensch, and it's nimshach through the arm into the etzbah, and then the etzbah divides up, or the fingers together divide up that whole united concept, or that concept which has already begun split into different particles, but the fingers divided up into a ribui different pi'ulas. For example, you see a person playing on a violin or a chayes, the fingers move at tremendous speed, and they divide what is an emotional reaction taking part in him and an understanding of the music into a myriad of different small inyanim. Meaning that the inyan of the fingers is to divide things up into a ischalkes, and that ischalkes makes it possible for the mensch to relate and to bring his emotions into the physical and distant world from his emotional life, from his feeling how things are, especially b'machshava how much more so B'diva into Maisa. There's a tremendous difference. And that interdivision into Ribui Pu'ula, so that's through the fingers. So the fingers have a very important role in the life of a man. So they divide up all the Hamshochas from the Koiches HaNefesh through the Levushi HaNefesh into a myriad of different Pi'ulas. So the same thing Kavioho by the Eibishter. Just like we find that there's emotion and Eitzel HaOdam, so it is Lamaila by the Eibishter. There's the Midas, L'cha Hashem Agdula, Agdula, Tiferes, V'Neitzel, V'Arid, Kichel, V'Shamayim, V'Oretz. So with the Eibishter has the for Midas. And Kavioho, that's the way he relates already in a way that takes him outside of the Moichin, Chabad, into a relationship to the Nivroim. But just like by a means, the Indian from emotions are too withdrawn and spiritual to actually affect the physical world themselves. They have to come onto some medium that will be broken up into particles, be able to affect the physical world. Well, that's the Indian of Malchus. So therefore, or particularly Neitza, Choid, Yesoid, and Malchus. Because they're already the Indian of Michutz Lahamidas, they're already got to do with Ashpoya. Bachutz. And just like we see that there's a big finger or a middle finger by a mensch, which he's able to do more stronger pu'ulas and more mechuvendike pu'ulas, with a small finger he's somewhat limited and he doesn't use it all that much for delicate and for all sorts of carefully aimed pu'ulas. But that's indicative of a very low form of chayas, which is just purely for inyonim, or what you might call taktoinim or pshutim, with the small finger. So the same malchus, particularly chitonius of malchus, its whole inyan is to only bring down the chayas into Havdalah, and it'll go into yesh mino ayin, with like Avi Alakus. This is a key taktoin here, choliot. And as we say, all the elements biyah, the elements are taktoinim, or the elements are nifrodim, and the fire, Chitonius HaMalchus, which brings all the Ashpoah into the lower world, and particularly down into Olam Hazeh, that's called Etzboy Haka Aktana. The closest scene of Malchus is called Etzba, because it's like Etzboy's Beklal. And so the Etzboy's Beklal are more shot to the Chitonius HaMidah, like Neitza Choid Yisrael, and also the Koil, the Indian of Malchus, but that's more shot to the small finger, to the less active Ulatika finger, but that's the Indian of Malchus. So we see that the Gemara brings over there that the Eibishter was makpid on the Malachim, or a group of them, going to get to a certain Indian, and he put out his small finger, and they all became bottle. They all bottle on the spot, and the Gemara used the expression sorfon. They were burned or consumed. So the Biur Bezei is, according to Chassidus, that what happened that the Eibishter gave with his small finger a little bit more than what he would normally have given them. And that's the Pshat Hoishit Etzboya Katana. He poked them with his Etzboya Katana instead of just in some way indicating them, or in some way make it waving at them, or he actually poked amongst the Malachim Be'etzboy Haktana. Well, that's indicative of a Hashpoah Shaloi Hederach HaRogil, a little bit more, because it's still only with Etzboy Haktana. It's not any massive use Kaviocha at the hand. Like we see by Kriyas Yamsuf, it's written by Yahid Sols Ayod HaGedolah. But there it's brought down in the Haggadah, that was with all the Etzboys. And then the Eibishter smoked the Mitzrayim with the whole hand, with all the Etzboys. I brought to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, Darshan so many times 5, so many times 10, according to the hand and to the Etzboys of the hand, v'chulu. So the Eibishter did that, and with that they became completely oisma. So we see Lafizeh that it's a ha'ora which is nimshach l'chavish yesh mi'ayin in such a way that it's tremendously limited in order to be mislavish in each nivra, according to how he's able to be makabel, and not a drop more, as you might say, not an aspect of any more. Because if he were to be makabel, then he would be completely batel legamri v'ma Matthias, like the Alter brings out there in Shara Yichud, right at the very beginning, the Elul, there would be miskala on them, the inif and elakus, then the nivroim would be bottle, kamoi koidem sheishi shemei, braces, they just wouldn't have any matzias b'klal, they wouldn't be able to be makabel. Edefa, that's the klolos hamuan. So why does he make a koshkein between what happened to those malachim after they were already nischaver, and that is how much more so at the beginning of their creation, had we given them a bit more, they would never have come up, or they never come about. So we find in many places in Siddur that even though things are visited with what you might call delicate, it's a delicate task or a delicate matter to bring a certain inyan into being, and to bring it into B'derech Hisavas, whether that Hisavas be Yesh Mi'ayin or another form of Hisavas. But once you've already got it, and it's already established, it's Metzias, and Elokus is already supporting it, then it's possible for it to be Makabel and to be Shayak to certain higher in Yonim, which had they been Betchila, it would have been Yisam Midai. And let's put down when I get to the Odom, for example, and what he's also created, Yesh Mi'ayin, let's put down that had the Avis to be Megala to him at the beginning, then he also would have been able to come into being. He would have been just Niklog in Elikus, and he would have been bottled in an bottled by Matiyah. Over what he comes into being, then Halidei Avidosa, if he serves the Avista and he makes an effort to try and come close, then he can be Mamshich higher in Yonim. What had they been there with Tchilas Briyose, it wouldn't have been Shayat that he'd be Makabel those in Yonim. Over what he's already been, and he's already established himself Kaviochel, and he works hard, then it's brought down and says that he makes the Kli a greater Kli, as it were, to be Makabel. The Etzem Avodah of the Nivra, if he works hard, then he improves Kaviochel, the Koech of the Kli, to be Makabel. In other words, what you might call, he is Mashaper, what you might call, he improves the caliber of the Kli to be Makabel. So that's what the Koshkein is. That if I say that even after the Malachim were already there, and they were already serving the Eivishter B'derech Shalem, nonetheless they weren't able to be Makabel a slightly higher light, then how much more so at the very beginning, when it's much harder to bring something into being, then after it's already been established, then it's a spot to say that maybe it can be Makabel something higher. At the very beginning, and that's Nilmas in the famous Maimar Razal, what Rashi brings it right near the end of the term Parshas Eisa Bracha, and also it's brought down becoming Makemes, that Kol Hascholes Koshes, that all beginnings are difficult. They state in matters that I'll say to say a cloud that Kol Hascholes Koshes. In other words, to begin something, to start off a whole new process, particularly Yesh Mi'ayin, that's a difficult thing. It's a very delicate matter, and if you just give too much into it, then it'll become a little bit when it's already there, then it's possible to give it a higher oil. And so I thought that maybe that would also be the case with these Malachim. Nonetheless, he obviously gave them a little bit more, meaning that Malachim maybe don't have the same power to be Makabel. Or whatever may be the Sibba of that's the Koshkein. That if after they've already been there and they've already been involved in their Avodah, they weren't able to be Kabel a little bit more, then how much more so B'tchilas Haviyot. And if having established all that, the Rebbe goes on to say that that's the inyan of Yesh Mi'ayin, that it's a Dover HaNivdol, Kaviyot HaNivdeles, and it's tremendously carefully allotted into the Metzias of the Nivra. Umikoshkein B'ktei Hisavas Metziuso. Ubefrat, how much more so, B'ktei Hagashmiyas. Yes, so the Rebbe said, if all of this is true, even when they get to Malachim, what it's well known that Malachim are spiritual entities, and they don't have a guf Gashmi. But even though the Ramban writes Parichas that they do have a guf, but he writes that they have a guf which is made out of the two ruchnistic Yisayde, said he called the two ruchnistic elements, out of Eish Ruach. They have a goof, but they have a very delicate and ruchnisdike goof, not a goof gashmi. If we see by them that they can't take anything which is, even though they're ruchnias, they can't take a little bit more ruchnias than was allotted to their etzem matziyas, then how much more so when I get to gashmi? So the dover gashmi is a dover even further and even more muvdal and ruchach from because it's not even ruchnias, it's a mamish. Yeah, gashmi, yes. Then how much more so that the ha'ora, which is nimshach into that inyan of the olam hagashmi, must be a very limited and very measured inyan of highest eloki. And so that's what he said, that we see the Beneget the Elam HaGashmi, who dafki alidei shemahava misalemu mistater, that he hides himself and conceals himself, that if he has to hide himself and conceal himself, but or and if that's what we said to the pshat in Helam Vahester, the chayas is or and if delas with some temes. So if that's the case by the malachim, then for sure it's the case by the Elam HaGashmi. So that's the statement of the inyan ad kan. Now we bring a dugma, which is very common in Siddur. We bring a dugma from the koyches hanefesh, and we show how in the hierarchy and in the interrelationship of the koyches hanefesh, there's also a inyan of a dugma of ha'ora nivdeles b'derech yesh me ayin. We're going to bring a dugma in the koyches hanefesh and the gilui from the klolos chayas of the nefesh, and from the where they are in the moyach, particularly klulim beklolos matzav shalehem in the moyach, as the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya in Perik Nun Aleph, all the koyches are klulim b'toich hamoyach in one hiskalulas, how they get nimsha from there into the clay goof. We're going to bring a dugma now of a case of similar to this of yesh me ayin, and Ali Day said we'll be able to have a closer hasoga how it is in the etcheminin of yesh me ayin. As is well known, that Chassidus bases itself on a klal that if you talk on the koyches hanefesh, the Metz is familiar, he sees how his own inyonim function, then it's easy for him to take from that a moshel into the inyonim how they are l'mayla. Like we see in the concept of the revelation of the koyches hanefesh. And when we say isgalus, we mean from their shorish how they are in the moyach. Gilui haseichel mikoyach mekuyr haseichel hashoifea umagala es hashpa. He said, for example, like the revelation of seichel from the koyach and the moker and the source of seichel, which gives forth shoifea, it gives influence forth from itself. Umagala es hashpa. It reveals the influence or the ashpah of the koyach haseichel from its state of being a source point for the koyach haseichel. Harei, says the Rebbe, be'esh nimshacha askola, at the moment that the askola is nimshat to the mensch, in other words, the first appearance of the askola, which is what we call the nakudas chokma, the nakuda harishena, the skalas in the nakudas chokma, when that happens, the mensch doesn't see, or he's not aware, he's not able to observe any mokir from whence that seichel comes. He can't say, oh yes, I know where that came from. All he knows is that he had a darkness, he had a state that he wasn't able to understand. And all of a sudden, at the beginning is the koyach hachokma, and particularly when he gets to the mensch, it's this nakudas askola. All of a sudden he gets a sudden point of understanding, which we call the nakuda, or when he lights up and he says, oh, yeah, I've got the point. In other words, he's got the nakuda, and then he's got to develop it and work at it till he gets it in detail. So, at that moment that he gets the nakuda, does he really know where that came from? can he really describe what produced it and what action inside his, what you might call his mind, in a general way produced him that nakuda? He can't. All he can be sure is that's for sure that the nefesh somehow or another gave it to him. I mean, obviously it didn't just come from what you might call outer air. It didn't come from nowhere. That's for sure that it must have come from his nefesh. But he's not able to describe to you what process went on or at what level the nefesh came to him. All of a sudden he just got a sudden being, a sudden light that put him on the track of eventually understanding the whole Haskalah. So we see that what happens here is that our obvious mokher, which is not to be grasped or to be understood, has produced him in a way that he's not aware of how it occurred, a new inyan. So we're going to say that that process is similar to the concept of Yeshmi, of the inyan for Yeshmi. That's what it is. והגם שאנו יודעים מציאות כוח המשכיל, הגם that we know that there must be a מציאות, what we call כוח המשכיל, זהו רק מה שבאס או בשעה שנפל לו האסכולה החדשה, הרי הוא מרגיש שנמשך מאיזה מוקר, או כמו שכתוב במקום אחר. Now here we come up with this word כוח המשכיל. Now, koach hamaskil is what you might generally call, in a general translation, the mind. In other words, the power of the brain to produce you sikliyim. That's called the koach hamaskil. That power which makes you understand. Koach maskil, the power which makes you understand. Now that's not the koach haskalah, how it's in the etzem nefesh. That's a hamshocha in the etzem koyach that the nefesh has to be maskil, haskalah, and it's called a hamshocha in their limits. It's called. It's a gilui from the nefesh, but it remains hidden to the makabel, even though it's a gilui from nefesh. Now, why do we say it's a gilui from the nefesh? Because it begins to act already in a certain field, which is seichel. The way it is in the etzem nefesh is interwoven and interlinked so much with all the other koiches that you can't really identify it as koich ha-seichel, because it's all, as it were, united with all the other inyanim. The fact that it's gone out of that state of high iskadalus with all the other koiches, and it's moved into an area where it's going to deal with seichel, then that's what we call hamshocha. That's called hamshocha ner lemes. It's a hamshocha which is hidden still, because normally a hamshocha means that it comes into Gilui, so it has come into Gilui, but like Gavi the Makabel, it's come into Gilui, but it's still Ne'alam Mimem. And the reason we call it a Koyach HaMaskil, because it produces sickly. Its whole inyan is not to be maskil any particular inyan, but what it does is that it helps you, when you're faced with the challenge of a Haskalah specific, it does the unbelievable task of producing you the point. So how does it do that? It's not that it grasps the whole thing and says, oh, yeah, on a higher level, key, you hear a higher voice saying, oh, you understand this, and you got this, you see this all makes sense. Now, boom, don't you see this? It doesn't do that at all. It doesn't talk to you, it doesn't say anything, doesn't communicate. All of a sudden, boom, it drops you away. If you have a schus. If you don't have a schus, maybe you won't even do that. You might spend hours breaking your head, and then maybe in the end you might be lucky. It'll send you a boom. Because brought down in citizens that you have to have a schus sometimes to understand certain inyanim. It's not just stuff. Edifah, this power is it's got a relationship to specific sikliyim, but it's not specific seichel, and it's not even a koyach which deals with specific seichel. Now that's what's called in Siddur koyach hamaskil, that power which makes you understand. But that's called in Siddur a koyach hiyuli. Have you ever heard the word hiyuli? But the word hiyuli is really a Greek word. The truth is, the word hiyuli is actually a Greek word. It's borrowed into Lashon HaKodesh, and it means, how would you call it? All potential and all powerful potential source point. That's what a hiyuli means. Meaning that it's not any specific inyan in a certain field, but it can produce you specific inyanim by way of jump somewhat, by way of a kvitza, what you might call a heder ha'erech, kitzas, and it's a general source point from which these details can be popped out, as it were, but it is not just an adding up of all the details. You take all the details you ever thought and put them together, then you won't have that koyach. It's what's called a hiyuli. Hiyuli means like a klal, but it's not a klal, it's a klal hamudo mi'aprat. It's a klal, what you might call a tiresome klal. It never gets weary and it never stops. Yeah, from the moment you come into being till the moment when you go after Meir V'Esrim Shana, then it works even harder in a way, because then it takes you into the Haskalas Aliyah in Gan Eden. That process is already being completed, as is well known, and everything is going to come down Lamata. It's all going to come taken from Miyad in these Galas of Melech HaMashiach, and then the Koyach HaMatzah is going to be working at tremendous pace. However, it never actually deals with any specific thing. It's like a general source point that never tires of producing you whatever you may need in Seichel. So you might say, well, this called just a general thing that the Eibster made it produce Sichliim. Why do you call it a Koyach HaMaskil that is kilo linked with Seichel? Because the truth of the matter is that Koyach HaMaskil is not going to produce you an emotion. It's only going to produce your Seichel. In other words, it's already a Koyach in that field of what's called Seichel, but in that field Gufa, it's called hiyuli. It's a potential generality point, which can always produce you. It never gets tired, it never runs out, but it never deals with any specific Seichel. It produces you the beginning of all Sichling. And that's called the Koyach HaMaskil, and that's the word hiyuli. Now you've also got Koyach hiyuli of Chesed, you have Koyach hiyuli of Gevura, also in a form of hiyuli, but again to the emotions that they are. Those are other inyanim similar to what we're saying. But the Koyach HaMaskil, being as it is shat to the moyach, it's a more delicate and more elevated general koyach. So that's what we call Koyach HaMaskil. Now the word hiyuli, you might say, well, why do you use the word hiyuli as a Greek word? Why don't you have a word in Lashon Kodesh? So if you study the word hiyuli, then it's actually makes up a Lashon word, Le Hashem HaMalucha. Yeah, V'hoyasor Hashem HaMalucha. V'hoyasor Hashem V'hoyasor Li Hashem HaMalucha. In other words, that the word hiyuli makes up that Rosh Hashanah, which it means that Chassidus never borrowed any word from anywhere unless there's some remez to the tachlis of all things hidden inside it. In other words, what do you need a koyach for of seichel? What do you need seichel for? What's the whole purpose of having seichel? That you should come to know that Ki Lashem Hama V'hoyasor Hashem Lo Maluch. It just came from a chasna. It's also brought down that the word kalu is Ki Lashem Hama Hamalucha, but that's also a similar inyan. That Koyach HaMaskil is a dover which is moved out from anything specific. And therefore, Seichel is not Koyach HaMaskil. Maskil means it makes Seichel, and it can produce you a point which will begin a Seichel, but it's not Seichel. It's a generality point where it's entirely able to produce you Sichliim. But Seichel means that a mensch is already beginning to understand something. In Koyach HaMaskil, he didn't begin to understand anything yet, except maybe very, very great people, tremendously elevated people. They can maybe come to a point where they move into their Koyach HaMaskil and they start understanding things like in the Koyach HaMaskil, especially in certain places that certain people achieve that. And then they are so high that if you start telling them details, or you're not able to say, listen, don't be involved with me. They're already miles and miles ahead, because they're way up in a whole general understanding of thousands of sikhli and biyagad, and you want to tell them to prat in a certain muskil. They just think it's a waste of time. And therefore they bring down about the Rogachover guns. I told the story that I think I told you guys the story once, that there was a whole group of Bochum from Lubavitch. They wanted to hear what he was going to say. He was going to say some beer and some Indian, some halacha, so he was going to say a beer in a shul. So all the Bochum from Lubavitch happened to be there, and they knew that the Rebbeim said that he was an unbelievable great God. So they stopped in order to get in close to hear what he was going to say. So the governor of the shul said, "Don't stoop around here." He said, "There's no rivers around here." He said, "Stoop next. Don't push around here. There's no rivers here." So the Rogachover looked at him and he said, "Was ich gezogen is wie for say nista." He said, "What I'm going to say is anyway nista." See, a river says nista, Kabbalah. You guys are not up to the job. Rivers say nista. The Mishtardim, they call Chassidus nista. So the rabbis say nista, but the word nista means hidden. He said, "What was ich gezogen is say nista for it's hidden from them." He said, "I can understand the heck what I'm talking." Look, well, he was very sharp, the Rogachover. So he said, "Let's stay stupid." He said, "Let them push it, let them." But anyway, I say, "Give it a mind. Have you heard this from a person who was there?" Somebody who's up in that matrega that he's already being makabel from the Koach HaMaskil, anything else is hidden from, because he's in another level of grasping altogether, where he grasps huge amounts of things at one go, and you're still messing around trying to understand one point. Anyway, so that's the Indian of the Koach HaMaskil. V'zehu rak mashe b'shoshe neifel ask kol echadotche imamera, when the Koach HaMaskil sends him a new haskola, harihu margi shenim shekveizimach. He knows it came from somewhere. He feels that his mind somehow or another sent him that, but he can't describe to you. It's not known to him, the Koach HaMaskil, and he's not able to describe how it sent it to him, because a hiyuli is too general, and a hiyuli works only in the form of what we call a hamtua. It just produces it to you. And then we're going to bring the pasuk later. V'achokma me'ayin timotei. All you feel is that it came from somewhere. Avaloisha murgash metzius mamish. But not that you can really feel the metzius of the Koach HaMaskil, because you can't. You just know that it must have come from somewhere, but you don't know what you're feeling. You can know that there is such a matzias, but you can't feel the matzias. So therefore he says, "V'kol shechein mahusei." How much more so the mahus? V'loi kemoi b'amshochas nekudas ha'askola. Not, he said, to be compared to once the nekuda of the askola has already been produced to you from the Koach HaMaskil. And then that Nakuda goes down into Bina, for example, or there you can trace and you can see what is happening, and you can see the connection from one to the other, and you can see how Chokmah fed into Bina and how Bina was Makabeh. Not like the Koach HaMaskil fed you the Nakuda. In other words, that even there it's a hidden process. Because the way the Nakuda Saskola goes into Bina is also something not clear to us how it works. The Alter explains over there in Lekut Ter Pasha Riyeh, when they get to the Inin HaChochma, he calls it the Nakuda Behei Cholam, the whole Arichas over there, like the Nakuda entering the big hole. But we don't really understand how that works either. And how Bina manages to catch into the Nakuda Saskola is also a hidden, almost gula type of power on the part of the Nefesh. So therefore the Rebbe said there is a certain similarity that we don't really understand exactly how that works, but at least we can trace it and we can say, oh, here's the Nakuda Sachochma, and went into Bina and they interreacted and they helped one the other to be poiled their function, even though we don't quite understand exactly how that works either. But at least we can trace it and we know from whence it came, and we can know the Matthias of the Nakuda Saskola, even though we may not know the Mahus of that either. ולא כמו בהמשוכת נקודס האסכולה בכוח הבינה. דרבים יוי שהוא בחינס נקודה לבד. Even though the inyan from Chochmah is a nakuda, and one of the inyanim of a nakuda is that it's locked. It's how they call it sogu b'teich atzmei. It's very difficult to how they call it, take out a nakuda into detail, because the whole inyan of a nakuda is an intense shrinkage into one intense unit. Mikol Mokim Harihu Mahus Oyer Aseichel. Nonetheless, it is already defined as an entity, a Mahus meaning an entity of Seichel. It's already entered the realm of Seichel. It's just that the way it functions is like a segula. You just get lit up and you don't really know what it is and all the details, etc., and it's in a high and elevated level in the way it works, but it's already called Seichel, because you feel that you already understood something, and eventually Bina is going to help you to explain that. And therefore it's already become a mahus of the light of Seichel. Now when the Rebbe uses the word light, he's also being medactic, because the inyan of the nakuda is more that it sheds light on a thing rather than it actually gives it to you to understand. You just see, you say, I see it and I know it, but I can't really explain it yet. So that's a inyan of oyer. So therefore he said that is a oyer of Seichel, dahainu oyer ha-chochma meir begirui bekoach habina umurgash boy, and it's felt and it's understood. Yeah, inside Bina, even though we can't really explain that either, but nonetheless it's traceable, and the inyan of the nakuda opens up inside Bina, and it's able to be felt. Which is the Koach HaMaskil. Hari Mekoyer HaSeichel Eina Nigla Umurgash Klal Afila Metzius. It's not a revealed and it's not felt, even the Metzius. We just know there must be such a Metzius, but we're not magish what type of Metzius Klal. We have no knowledge what that is. We would just call it, but even clearly the mind. We said came from somewhere. Edifar said that that's the difference. Once it's already become Nakudas HaSeichel, what Nakudas HaSeichel also are hidden and Segula Dikazah, but nonetheless it's already entered the realm of your understanding. It's become Seichel by the mensch, and therefore you can see where it goes. I think you can trace it into Bina, and Bina will tell you that it got to the Nakuda. Even though to really say that Bina got to Nakuda, you have to work very hard. It has to go through a lot of different processes. Then it goes back into the ultimate expression of the Nakuda. Of it does get it. And therefore there's an interaction and an inter-understanding between the two. V'afapi, says the Rebbe, shebavade kol prote oifani amshoches gilu aseichel eino ela alpi. Alpi oifen mekoiroi amamshichoi tomi. Here's another inyan what the Rebbe is now bringing into our understanding of the Koach HaMaskil. And that is like this. What we just said is we made the Koach HaMaskil a very general and elevated and withdrawn matter, that we have no real contact with it, we have no real knowledge, and the use of the word hiyuli tends to abstract it and sort of put it in another abstract world, an abstract bracket that just drops things out in a oven which is not muva. Emes, all that is true. However, said the Rebbe, the truth of the matter is that the Koach HaMaskil is not just a Koach Hiyuli Kloli She'en Lo Yikol Yachas to what you might call the individuality of the mensch, or even to the way that he understands things. In other words, that not every Koach HaMaskil works the same. Because if it were just purely a Hiyuli Kloli, She'em V'Zeko Inyan Proti Klal, then you wouldn't be able to say that. You wouldn't be able to say that by each mensch it's in a different way. It would just be like a, how do you call it, Moyach HaKloli, which was just dropped into every mensch, and it just worked the same by everybody. But we see it's not like that. We see that some people are musugal to understand certain things, and to pop into their minds certain inyonim, and other inyonim we can talk to and they won't really get the point. They just don't turn on. Like it's one on, and people say, oh, I have a chush, I have a feeling for this type of understanding, and other people say, for example, in Kalki calculus or in mathematics or something, the cloud escape minister, have absolutely no hasoga cloud. But in another Indian, it does show that they work. And so we see that there's what's called a certain tziyur prati in the koyach hamaskil, despite his generality. In other words, that not everybody deals with sikligim the same. And the truth of the matter is that it's uncountable myriad combinations of that every person's a different person, but again to how he is musugal to understand and how his mind, as you might call it, works. What that indicates that the koyach hamaskil, despite his hiyuli state, he's really a individual thing, and he has his own klalim and his own inyonim lafi, the way he works, and he works in a certain manner by certain people and in another manner by others, and in that group it's always different. It's never identical by two peoples. And one of the fellows, what she said, that Kumta is that we're making the koyach hamaskil very, very general and very mudal. The truth of the matter is that it's more specific and more adequate according to the needs of that mensch than what we really think. And that's the afalpi. Afalpi is always a kasha. I just said that the koyach hamaskil is a yuli, kloli, and this. Afalpi, that the truth is it's not. It's really a guided and limited koyach. When I say limited, it's a guided and individual koyach, which has only a certain area in which it functions in every individual. I would just point out, some have got certain gifts for certain understanding, others just don't have in another field at all. That produces a bit of a problem. That would tend to indicate a kasha that maybe the koyach hamaskil is shy to certain, because he hasn't himself an individual and limited area type function, which maybe makes him limited and more close to our soul than what we thought. So therefore that's the afalpi. The afalpi shebavadai kol prote eifane amshochet gilei aseichel. All the different ways that the seichel comes out into revelation in any given mensch. It's only according to the manner of his moker, tomid, which is bringing forth all the different seichels that he needs. He said that according to the erech, meaning according to the measurement, literally, of the mila of his particular koyach hamaskil in its very self, kainu asiklim amnimshochim menu. In other words, that every koyach hamaskil has got a oifan, it's got a way in which it tends to function better than in another oifan. Okay, all of a sudden, it says jumps into the most extreme possible moshel that we can imagine. Okay, melech shleimai. The vayachem mikol odom, vayacham mikol odom. The Shlomo was, he was he was a chacham mikol odom. In other words, that his chachma was nifla mikol odom in the world, which means that koyach hamaskil must have had the most unbelievable abilities to drop him sickly. Shezeu mitzad milas koyach hamaskil she. Now, what does that mean? That means that Shlomo HaMelech had an individual koyach hamaskil. He had a koyach hamaskil which functioned the way Shlomo HaMelech was meant to function by the Eibusher. In other words, there was able to drop him bombers, one after the other, in his even that he was yecham mikol odom. He was a complete, how do you call it, a thunderstrike compared to other people, and therefore it's written that he was yecham mikol. Mikol Adam. But nonetheless, that was because he had a certain koyach hamaskil the Eibusher gave him that was able to produce all these amazingly brilliant inyonim. But that was his individual koyach hamaskil. Therefore, we find that he had an amazing gift in giving mishalim, and that's even from Sefer Mishlei Shleimai, and it's brought down by Davish Shleimai Shleishas Alovim. Marshall, as he stated in Pasuk, that he said 3,000 Mashalim. So the Siddur says that that's not altogether, he said 3,000 Mashalim, but he said on one Indian 3,000 Mashalim. In other words, on any Indian you gave him, Shlomo, he would eventually be able to give you 3,000 Mashalim. Well, they stated, not that he said altogether 3,000. Alright. Now, he said he had the most unbelievable gift, to bring mashal, which is brought in, said it's a very special ability, of the seichel to produce a good and accurate mashal. So that we see that Shlomo HaMelech had his own milah, milah's koyach hamaskil shalei. Somebody that the power of his mind is sharper or stronger. Harihu maskil askolas hamukis. He gets deeper concepts. Another thing that we see, a very fascinating Indian, not only in the actual type of muskal, the actual type of askolas, but even the way the mensch is able to deal and give over his muskalis. For example, he's a bar seichel, he's a mensch, he's like a son of seichel, he's very united with seichel. Shemevin is a seichel atzmei heitev. He understands it for himself, beautiful. In other words, he gets it profoundly and with absolute clarity and greatness. To another person, he's not able to explain it. He can say, look, I really appreciate this, but just forget me, I can't explain it. You have to have somebody else. V'yesh should be and some people lahasbir kol seichel u'zuloseh b'tuv tam v'duas. In other words, there's some people that you give him anything, give him the most profound thing, and he'll be able to give it over to other people in a way that they'll all be, saying, ooh, this is great, that's it. And they'll be taking it and understanding it in every detail. Yeah. Like I might say, he understands it better, or he understood it profoundly. He understood it profoundly. He's got a certain ability that his mind gives him to give over to others, and he's a more sort of, how do you call it, up sort of derived person into the etzem of the muskal, believe the to bring it down. And that was the greatness of Shlomo, that he was not only able to bring it down to other people, but he can put it into mashalim. That says the Rebbe, well, you might say, well, that's already another story. That's already after you've already got sichliim. What can you do with them? Either you hold them for yourself, or you're able to give them over to other people. And the truth of the matter is that that's almost totally in koiches and nefesh atzmo. Because the person who gets everything clear, he's more like a bar chochma. And the person who's able to give it over and talk about it a lot, he's more like a bar bina. So I might have thought that they have to be connected one to the other. So we see that lav davka that they have to be. It's two different gifts. That the mind produces the person that gift, and the mind produces that person another gift. So the Rebbe says, Achidish Dova, not only in the etzem ability to be maskil, but in the way that you deal with it, and the way that you give it over, or that's also totally in the, what you might call, the manner and almost the form of your koyach hamaskil, meaning that every koyach hamaskil is limited and has its own Indian, despite the fact that it's a hiyulim. Yodua, dezet tolui be'im sheyesh bi'cholos koyach hamaskil shloi lahaskil askoles kadoshes, yeah, v'yesh be'koyach, this is the Rebbe, he puts in a correction there, v'yesh be'koyach gam kain Lishanesh kol seichel ulahavia bo'even kozesh yeh muven ela. In other words, there's some people that they take the seichel with tremendous profundity, but they take it le'atzmom, they take it into their own selves and they unite with it. And there's some people that their understanding and the way that they grasp the seichel is that they have an ability to almost alter the seichel. Now, when we say l'shanis, we don't mean to change it in the real thing. If you change it, then it's a bluffer. We're not talking about changing it, but we're talking that he can alter the way that seichel came to him, and he can give it out in a different way than what he understood it. So the Rebbe says that's not a special gift that he just has in his dibur and his machshava and his other koyches and everything. The gufa is a gift from the koyach hamaskil. That's an ability. So that's a chiddush nifla, a noisa that we have now in the koyach hamaskil. That not only does he produce new siklim, but he produces abilities to relate to those siklim and use them. And remember, this is a chiddush dover that the Rebbe says. The way you function b'klal with your siklim and the way you even relate to other people is dependent in your koyach hamaskil, which means that every koyach hamaskil has a certain individual aspect about it, despite the fact that it's a yuli. Hare the prote oifane am shochas haseichel hein kefi oifan. He said the different manners by which, now manner means a practical application. The manner, the way a thing works, means a practical inyan bozeh. He said that the prote eifane amshochas haseichel, they are according to kafi or even makoyer haseichel. That's according to what type of koyach hamaskil you got. I'm couldn't tell you that the person who's a good explainer to others, well, that's something in his very seichel which benches him with that power. It's not that he's got some other koyach, and that everybody gets the seichel the same way. No, everybody gets the seichel in a different way from the koyach of the mokeh of the seichel, which is the yin from koyach hamaskil. Now that's a chiddush dover. It's a dover nifla. And that leads us to Akasha. How come we said that the Inu for the Koyach HaMaskil is a Yuli, he's very individual. So the Rebbe said, Mikom, okay, nonetheless, Ein Koyach HaSeichel Nira Venigla Klal. Nonetheless, he said that Koyach HaSeichel, meaning the Koyach HaMaskil, is not Nira Venigla at all. She'ena Nira Rakilu HaSeichel Lavad. Koyach HaMaskil Hu Behelame. In other words, that even though he is individual, and he has individual powers, well, that doesn't hide the fact that he remains Behelem. He's a wondrous thing, this koyach hamaskil. On the one hand, he's hidden legamre. On the other hand, he's got certain very individual ways of functioning. That was brought down and says that some people, they've also got the ways of the way they understand a thing which is taught to them by somebody who knows what he's doing. Some people chop more of this angle, some people take it more in another way, and some people take it very, very tmimistic in a way of affecting immediately their midas, and others, take it into a higher realm of moichin and then faupul, but everybody is very, very different. Nonetheless, that koyach hayuli v'akloli remains behelem. You don't have any hasoga or yediyah, afil yediyah samatzius in that koyach, even though it functions in an almost individual way. V'hainu said the Rebbe, why? Hainu means to say, lafisha matzia saseichel mim koiroi hu ki ein yesh me'ayin. Oh, that's what we're working for. And the Rebbe, that's the sikum adover, that the whole interrelationship of how seichel come out of the koyach hamaskil is picked as if the in of yesh me'ayin. In other words, that the mokeh remains completely behelem, and the thing comes out as if it didn't have any kesher with the. That's like how an ivdel is legamre from the mokeh, and that's what we call the inyan v'yesh me'ayin. Kamosh kosu mokeh macher be'inyan ve'achokma me'ayin tima. Say what the pasuk in here, what he said, the chokma is to be found. Matzia means you find something, you don't know where it came from. Yeah, chokma me'ayin comes from the level of absolute ayin legabi your seichel. Timotzei, and it's a matzia. When you do find it, when you do get it, it's a kilivador matzia. Ulazoish, and therefore, he actually is matzia sas kola, kiim kasher koyach hamaskil mitzamtzeim u'misalim biatzmusei. He said, therefore, when that koyach hamaskil produces you that boom, and it produces you that dot, that means it must be undergoing a certain symptom and convulsion almost within itself to produce you that particular detail. And therefore that means that the koyach hamaskil, as it were, hides and withdraws from you, and yet nonetheless, it has this amazing ability to pop you out the Inyan. But if it were just to come to you the way it is, then you would never know klal of any seichel. Therefore, we have to say that it's mitzamtzeim u'mishaleim bi'atzmoi, which means she'ena nira v'nigla klal, v'oz, after that hiding, and that what you might call richuk of the koyach hamaskil, nimsha b'chinas ha'seichel ha'galui, b'chinas matzias seichel. Well, then it becomes an inyan from a matzias of seichel. In other words, it's an entity in your mind which can only be described as seichel. But the way it is in the koyach hamaskil, it's not a matzias of seichel. It's just a general yuli which can produce these inyanim. And in order to do that, it has to, as it were, hide itself and be mitzamtzim in itself in order to allow that to pop out to you. Which means there's an ongoing, almost like you might call derech ha'hester v'atzimtzum, inside the koyach hamaskil itself. Amamela, that's the wondrous picture that we see, that there can be a matzias of yesh me'ayin in the koyches of the Adam, in the koyches hanifeh. So now he's going to go on to say that in the Indian of Elul v'Olol. Well, we also find the Indian of Elul v'Olol inside the koyches of the nefesh. We'll see that it's nonetheless very different than in the Indian of yesh me'ayin, as we just explained. Okay, so now we're going to have Mariv, and then maybe some of you guys are going to go to the Chasna.
You mentioned that this thing that you get this tremendous burst of understanding, this very, very big thing, and when you connect to it, and they see things on that level, and it's sort of like a big monologue. It's an advantage on other people. But before we learn some of the thought, when we do some of the Barashkaf Rishona, it's worse than just going over and over and over and over. See, we said there that